Hello everyone, lovely to have you back. Today we are going to chat about Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. This is another of the books from the Women's Prize Longlist for 2023 that I'm slowly ploughing through. And I have to say, I loved this book. I absolutely loved it. Any book about refugees is obviously urgent and necessary, especially one that speaks with as much authority and as much beauty as this writing from Cecile Pin. But what I particularly found powerful about this account, when I look at some of the other books that I've read on similar areas, is how restrained this book is. And it doesn't have the anger or fury that you would have every right to expect from any other book about refugees. And somehow in this restraint, which deliberately reflects some of the generational and cultural issues in being able to talk about such terrible experiences, but also it infuses this book with a huge amount of power and grace, which really elevates this tiny tragedy of three kids who are trying to escape post-war Vietnam into something that is like poetry, like a myth, like a profound universal tale that is to be learnt. I adored it. I'm not even sure I'm being eloquent enough, but what I kind of mean is that this becomes a universal story from such a tiny tragedy. So apologies, I can't even get that out right. What is this book about? Okay, we start in post-war Vietnam, where it is the late 1970s. Vietnam has been taken over by the communists, and there is not only huge suffering in terms of malnutrition and famine and food, but there's also the indoctrination and cleansing that comes with this extremely totalitarian communist takeover of South Vietnam. What Cecile reflects on is one family who are part of I think it was estimated almost 500,000 Vietnamese boat refugees who tried to flee from Vietnam to Hong Kong in the late 1970s. And she picks one family from this and follows their journey to whatever end as a story about suffering and survival and legacy and inherited trauma. So we have a family of parents and 4 young kids, 3 young boys and a young girl. The father wants to get them to Hong Kong as part of these Vietnamese boat refugees, and he believes he can get them to the US, where he has a brother who is hopeful that would be able to get a visa out of Hong Kong and away. However, the journey to Hong Kong is going to be treacherous, and he pays smugglers to take his family in 2 separate boats. So he and his wife and their youngest son Dao are going to go in one boat, and they'll be followed by the daughter and their 2 sons. Only one of those boats makes it to Hong Kong. Who makes it is Anne and her 2 younger brothers. The parents and the youngest boy Dao are lost to the sea. So we follow this completely terrified 3 kids, where Anne is quickly forced to take on a parental role which she has no skill, experience or should ever have to, as she navigates some terrible experiences which actually happened to the Vietnamese boat refugees. And then what Cecile does is she follows these 3 kids through various resettlement centres till, quite by a strange twist of fate and decision, they are relocated to Thatcher's Britain, where of course they are not exactly met with universal support. What is great about how Cecile writes this is she has 3 narrative lines weaving through the book. So we have Anne and her 2 brothers and the challenges they have, losing their culture, finding their culture, trying to find a place, losing their anchor, having to become adults before their time, the trauma of their experience, trying to find any kind of support network or work, full stop, in the UK, the kind of management of their expectations and their dreams, as you know, they are not welcome, there is no structure to support them to achieve their potential or dreams, and just how that tragedy of leaving Vietnam is worsened by every event and experience they have from there on. Weaving that, Cecile also bringing into the spirit bringing into the title Wandering Souls. She has the voice of their youngest brother Dao, a baby who died at sea with his parents when they didn't make it to Hong Kong. And Wandering Souls refers to sort of the Vietnamese culture that if you don't bury and respect your dead, their souls wander until they can find peace, which is what happened to Dao. And so there's this wonderful, painful, bittersweet storyline that runs through it of Dao not being able to be with his brothers and sisters. Alongside that, Cecile has a very interesting present day, almost academic narrative where she intersperses these sad stories with real facts or reflections on certain elements of the tragedies of the Vietnamese boat refugees, from piracy, from mass raping to experiences in Vietnam. And it's only at the end of the book where you realise where this present day narrative is coming from. And it just really brings in that really wraps it up beautifully into the circle of life and how the next generation, the second gen and the third gen from refugees or migration, how they live and learn about what was experienced by their parents or their grandparents and how they reflect on that and how it makes them feel about what they now call home, etc., etc. Beautifully done. It sounds heavy. It isn't. Look how slim this book is. It is beautifully written. And I loved those three plot lines, those three narratives that run all the way through this book that actually flesh out this book, because Cecile obviously wants Anne and her two brothers are really repressed. There obviously a lot of emotions. There's a lot of internality and internal struggle and torment that's hard for them to articulate. And you don't want to force them to articulate it as characters in the book if it isn't authentic. So in order to sort of weigh that up with facts and bittersweetness, she brings in Dao and this present day narrative drive, which has these academic inserts about what happened to some of the Vietnamese boat refugees and the actual context of some of the things that happened to Anne. And I adored it. I adored it. I rattled on for 7 minutes, but bluntly, I loved this book. It is restrained, it is heartfelt, it is bittersweet, and it is just truthful and authentic. And I commend Cecile Pin on this book wholeheartedly. It is really enjoyable and beautiful, and I recommend it completely. Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin.